The Act Against Hate Alliance, or AAHA, is looking for solutions in response to a rising number of hate crimes in California. The state attorney general says the numbers are a real problem. They are at their highest point in nearly 2 decades. Part of the solution to stemming the tide of hate crimes may lie with religion. That was the focus of an April meeting hosted by the AAHA. It featured religious leaders such as Dr. Dawn Michelle Whitehead. She serves as the vice president of the Office of Global Citizenship for Campus, Community, and Careers at the American Association of Colleges and Universities.
What we argue from the perspective of the work that we've been doing with our colleagues at Interfaith America is that religion and faith tradition, or not practicing a faith tradition, should be a part of these initiatives that we're considering. We're talking about diversity and we're talking about student engagement.
Whitehead found support from Rabbi Sarah Horonsky. She is the president of the Board of Rabbis of Southern California.
We are very familiar as a Jewish people of what it means to be the victim of hate speech and how it can erupt and explode. And we're taught as well that Lashon Hara, the evil tongue, is one of the things we have to fight the hardest against.
Californians must learn to embrace differences and accept one another as equals if the hate crime numbers are to drop. That's the kind of solution that Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is looking for. He is the president and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy.
Ultimately, I would ask in the interfaith idea that yes, interfaith is about commonalities, but real honest interfaith is about actually embracing differences.
The best way to conquer hate crimes in California is through respect, love, and understanding. This is the way of Buddhism. The Shilai Temple and Gardens in Hacienda Heights, California, is the largest Buddhist monastery in the Western Hemisphere. The following words of wisdom and advice about reducing hate crimes in California come from the current abbot, the Venerable Hui Dong.
Practicing patience in challenging situations, cultivating loving kindness and compassion by helping others and volunteering in the communities, and cultivating inner peace through spiritual education can help people learn how to face adversities in life.
The core mission of the Act Against Hate Alliance is to identify the root causes behind hate crimes and propose solutions to stop them. It is made possible through funding from the California State Library Stop the Hate Initiative. The organization was co-founded by former California State Senate Minority Leader Bob Huff and May Ho Huff. For the Act Against Hate Alliance, I'm Bill Bird.
Hello, everybody. I'm former State Senator Bob Huff, and I'm the program's MC today. You are watching highlights of last month's program compiled by Bill Bird, our communications director, and the video editing done by Ronnie Chung, our technical director. Our theme last month, as you may have gathered, was related to the religious community's role in reducing hate crime. Today's briefing is the 9th in a series of monthly media briefings hosted by Act Against Hate Alliance, with this month's focus on the importance of organizational collaboration. I'll now turn the microphone over to my wife, May, to share her comments.
Can everyone see me? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our program today. Act Against Hate Alliance was founded in 2022 to focus on finding and implementing solutions to reduce hate crimes. Today, we are focusing on the role of organizations and how to establish leadership in this issue within their own organizations and their collaboration with other organizations to reduce hate crime. We assemble a team of truly globally well-known experts and leaders to discuss their ideas and experiences related to this critical issue. Hate crimes create an environment of fear and intimidation, which can lead to social divisions and undermine the fundamental values of equality and respect for human rights. By working together, organizations can pool their resources, expertise, knowledge, and influence to raise awareness, prevent hate crimes, and support victims. Collaboration can also send a strong message that hate crimes will not be tolerated, that everyone has a role to play in promoting tolerance, respect, and respect. Ultimately, by working together, organizations can help to create a safer, more equitable, and more just world. Bob, back to you.
You may have noticed we've gone a little bit low tech today. We were having some internet problems, but I think we've got it covered. So there's no doubt that organizations have a leading role in providing resources to focus on and reduce prejudices and hate. They can lead by example within their own organization and achieve an economy of scale by collaborating with other organizations. We look forward to learning from our esteemed speakers today, and frankly, it is really a stellar cast of speakers that we've assembled to educate us. To our media friends, please log your name, organization, and email address in the chat so we can send you follow-up material related to this meeting today. You can post any questions you have in the chat, and time permitting, we will take those at the conclusion of all the speakers speaking. Please address any chat you have to everyone and not specifically to May or me. By the way, has Fiona joined us?
Yes, she has.
Okay, great. So Fiona Ma is California's 34th state treasurer and the first woman of color and first woman certified public accountant elected to the position. The state treasurer's office was created in the California Constitution in 1849 and provides financing for schools, roads, housing, recycling and waste management, hospitals, public facilities, and other crucial infrastructure projects that better the lives of residents. California is poised to become the world's fourth largest economy, and Treasurer Ma is the state's primary banker. Presently, her office processes more than $3 trillion in banking transactions, with oversight for an investment portfolio averaging over $200 billion. Prior to serving as California's treasurer, Fiona has served on the State Board of Equalization, the California State Assembly, and the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Fiona, thanks for taking time from your schedule and joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob and May. And it was very interesting to hear some of the global religious leaders on your call, also doing their part to combat the Asian hate that is going around. Personally, as elected officials, myself, I try not to be partisan. I try not to focus on the negative. I try to get everyone to think about our commonalities. And one of my favorite, mottos is that we have surpassed Germany post-COVID. So it is now the United States, China, Japan, and California if we were our own economy. And that is because of the great diversity, our strong immigrant populations, our entrepreneurs, the people that came to the state of California for the American dream. And that's how I like to phrase my speeches when I am out in public. I think as elected officials, we need to stay away from partisanship, stop, promoting some of the hate and the people who are continuing to spread that message, because it is not healthy, as May said. It impacts your state of mind, the environment that you're with. It creates toxic environments, and then other people who are listening to you then also start becoming negative and think it's okay that you can, break into, cars or you can attack elderly people. It is not right. And so we need to just continue to spread the message of love and unity and support and the positive aspects of our diversity. And I like to say in California, when one of us is impacted, one group is impacted, we do stand up and rally together, whether it was Black Lives Matters, whether it is Stop Asian Hate, whether it's the latest attacks on our LGBTQ community. We do stand up here in the state of California. We can't talk about other states, but here in the state, I welcome everyone I thank everyone here on this call, Bob and May, and the state of California for allocating money to raise the awareness, to share our experiences. Because when we know publicly that there is someone who is out there that is attacking someone on the streets of San Francisco, we can alert each other and we can be more vigilant and also make sure that our law enforcement is notified and that we are doing our part to keep our community members safe. But if we don't know about that there are people actually out there perpetrating these type of crimes, then they will continue to perpetrate the crimes on other victims. And that's when we really do suffer. And so I want to thank everyone for standing with us in stopping Asian hate crimes. Unfortunately, I'm driving around San Francisco right now, and there's not a lot of people going to work, lots of people on the streets. But it is really important that we continue to support more money for mental health crisis beds, mental health service providers, supporting them, and also building communities, get people out of their homes. Lots of people are still depressed after COVID, and depression leads to, spiraling downward. So if you sense that any of your friends or family members are a little bit remote, feeling a little depressed, why don't you call them up? Ask them to come out for a meal, bring them with you to an event, which is what I like to do. And hopefully we can get through this this very dark time and get back to a prosperous economy where we are all working and happy and supporting each other again. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity to just say a couple words here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Fiona, for taking time. I know you got something going on here in about 20 minutes, so we appreciate you spending a little time with us and sharing your ideas.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tomas Beretz. Mr. Beretz is a sociologist with a decade of experience in studying discrimination, terrorism, online hate speech, and the media. He's been working with INACH for more than 7 years as the head of research and analysis, and later as an operational manager. He was also heavily involved in the analysis of anti-terrorist legislation and its conflicts with human rights in the UK and other Western democracies after the Islamic terror wave of the 2000s. He acquired his first class Bachelor of Arts with honors degree in sociology and criminology in England at the University of Bedfordshire. Afterwards, he obtained a Master of Arts degree with a distinction in Budapest at the Central European University in Sociology and Social Anthropology. Welcome, Tomas. Glad you could join us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here, and I was very happy to be invited. Yeah, I don't have a lot of time. I know that I have 10 minutes, so I will try to be very, to the point and succinct. But I will try to kind of summarize Enoch and what we are doing in general. Enoch was founded in 2002 by Magenta Foundation in the Netherlands and Jugendschutz.net in Germany. And at first, the main goal was to establish complaints bureaus for hate speech online in different European countries and in countries outside of Europe, because back then, obviously, on online platforms, reporting features were not as readily available against hate speech as they are right now. Enoch grew throughout the years. I joined the secretariat of the network as the head of research and analysis in 2016. Back then, we had around 15 members, and since then we've grown to 34 members in 27 countries. These are mainly EU countries and European countries, but we have members in Russia, Israel, Morocco, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, US, Argentina. So we are kind of spread out all throughout the globe now. And we've also always had US members too. Basically, the way we work, I'm trying to focus more on our structure and how we work together to kind of have a common voice within the EU, especially to have an impact on anti-hate speech policy and anti-hate speech, regulatory environments within the EU. Basically, we have the secretariat as the center of the network, and then anybody who's a foundation or another type of NGO can join us if they agree to a common shared creed. And from then on, they are participating in our activities. And also these NGOs, keep doing their own work within their own respective countries. We are mainly focusing, as I said, on hate speech, not hate crime, but we think that's extremely important because hate speech has a very, very large chilling effect on political speech by vulnerable communities online. They are silenced quite heavily by hate speech and by racism and discrimination on different online platforms, and this pushes them to the fringes, or they just completely exit kind of this modern public sphere. We also think that it's very important to counter hate speech because even though hate speech is not always followed by hate crime, but hate crimes are very, very often or almost always preceded by hate speech. It's very, very rare to see a domestic terrorist attack such as Breivik in Norway, or if we think about Christchurch in New Zealand, where hate speech hadn't happened before the actual terrible acts that were committed. So that's what we are focusing on. Obviously, our work is mainly focused on the EU and the EU countries because we are heavily funded by the European Commission and the European Union, which also means that the legislative space that we are working in is very, very different to the US. Which means that there are, hate speech laws in place almost everywhere that are fairly harmonized within the EU. And also now we have the Digital Services Act that aims to harmonize these even further. And we also have the so-called Code of Conduct on tackling illegal content online. That's what we have been mainly working with, that aims to basically get rid of hate speech as quickly as possible, where social media companies agreed with the European Union that they would remove illegal content from their platforms within 24 hours from receiving the report on it. So this has been our main focus point. But beyond that, several other projects and enterprises have grown out of ENOC, involving ENOC members, like the Get the Trolls Out project consortium that's been running for years and years now, and it has been funded by the US State Department. We have the Facing Facts Network now, that mainly focusing now on hate crimes and preventing hate crimes. And training activists, they started out as mainly a training for activists and other trainers on how to implement counter speech and counter narrative tactics. So in a nutshell, I think this is us. I don't want to take up more than my allotted time. But if you have any more questions, to us, I'd be very, very happy to answer all of them. And also, if you want to know more about us, just go on our website, which is inach.net. And you can see all our reports, our research, our studies, and everything about our members basically is on there.
Great. Thank you so much, Tomas. And if there are questions, we will raise those with you at the end of everyone's comments here. So our next speaker is Maria Daniela Maruda, who has represented Greece on the European Committee Against Racism and Intolerance since 2015 and currently serves as chair. Professor Maruda is a professor in international law, Pantheon University of Athens, and Jean Monnet Chairholder of European Union Solidarity and Civil Protection and Humanitarian Action, with emphasis on migration and COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Maruda is UNESCO Chairholder on Peace, Human Rights and Democracy, and is head of EU's refugee agency known as UNHCR, conducting research projects on mapping integration indicators for the inclusion of refugee and migrant children through education, as well as on homeless unaccompanied children. Dr. Maruda has spent 15 years of experience in humanitarian fieldwork through the OSCE, UNHCR, and the International Committee of Red Cross in armed conflict areas. And they're the ones that pop into mind when you think of any hotspot in the world. She also has based in Greece with short-term missions areas in crisis or conflict. So Professor Maruda, thank you so much for joining us today to share your insights.
I thank you for the initiative, for your work, and for the important opportunity you're giving me to link US and the greater Europe represented by the Council of Europe, which I represent through the Committee Against Racism and Intolerance, been the chair since 2020, where we witnessed the consequences of the pandemic. And as an organization, the Council of Europe comprises of 46 member states after the expulsion of Russia in March 2022 after the aggression against Ukraine. ECRI in reality, as is our acronym, takes the pulse of racism and intolerance in the Council of Europe member states once every 5 years. So we are now on our 6th cycle monitoring. And on this cycle that has started a little bit before the pandemic, we look beyond legislation on policies, on effective and independent equality bodies, so where victims can go and complain and find an ally, and on inclusive education, which is something that we consider extremely important to change mindsets. Third issue is hate speech and hate crime, and then inclusive societies, especially when it comes to migrants inclusion and minorities such as the Roma. Groups, vulnerable groups in Europe that have experienced all these years exclusion and segregation. So as ECRI, we have been working since 1993, but more so, not only on finding ways to spread counter racist messages, because it's so easy to spread racist messages, but so difficult to counter them. So we have really struggled on how to recommend promising practices to member states on how they can themselves in society fight, not only on central level, but also on regional level and on municipal level. So this is very important. Every time we go during our monitoring visits in member states of the Council of Europe, we always make sure that we do field visits. So it's important to know what is happening in the whole country and not just in the capital. Then always visit different municipalities that have promising practices and use these as examples for other areas and cities. And also always try to visit refugee settlements, Roma settlements, minority areas. So this is very important to have a complete picture when you're doing monitoring work. So what the Council of Europe is doing in a famous triangle is A, standard setting. So we need principles to guide us in our work. And in that respect, in 2015, as ECRI, we have adopted recommendation on addressing hate speech with a number of principles and guidelines, giving specific examples on how to best address hate speech to member states. So this would be the standard setting. Then we have monitoring of the performance of states, not just legislation, as I told you earlier, but also policies. Even what seems to be the trend in the recent years, which is strategies and action plans. A lot of states tend to develop action plans to fight anti-Semitism, to fight anti-Muslim racism. We do not call it Islamophobia. We do not call this anymore just anti-Muslim hatred. We call it anti-Muslim racism, because you can have racialization of religious minorities. And this is a very recent opinion we have adopted and that can be found on our site. So it's important to have standard setting, then monitoring, and finally, and this is where synergies come in, EU, the European Union, and its member states fund different projects in member states of the Council of Europe to help them address recommendations of ECRI when it comes to racism and intolerance. So standard setting, monitoring, and then cooperation. So find ways to help governments do what they are supposed to be doing, or municipalities or regional authorities. So this is a quite golden triangle. So you can read on our site our monitoring reports of each one of the member states of the Council of Europe. Within the next 15 days, we will publish our annual report for 2022, where we have our trends, what we have witnessed in the last year. And it's important to also note that action against racism travels also from, not just from Europe to the US, but also eastwards. For example, the Black Lives Matters movement actually affected us a lot in ECRI and in Europe. We started suddenly discussing post-colonialism and how this fits in systemic racism because of the Black Lives Matters and George Floyd. And as ECRI, we have even published a quite strong statement on how important it is to address racist police abuse, including racial profiling and systemic racism in Europe through education, through history. And to come now to hate crime, I fully agree with what Tamas said, that as ECRI, we are also convinced that hate speech is often the cause of hate-motivated violence. So hate rhetoric in the public sphere, including in social media, may trigger somebody who hears or reads it to commit a violent physical attack against the often vulnerable minority groups that the hate speech is directed at. Another matter is that hate speech, when it exceeds a certain level of unacceptability, which goes well beyond anything which can be defended as covered by freedom of expression, may in some European national jurisdictions at least be prosecuted even as a crime. As we speak, the Committee of Ministers, the political body of the Council of Europe, is adopting shortly a recommendation on hate crime. The Committee of Ministers has just adopted a few months ago, in March 2022, a recommendation on hate speech, and now we see the link with hate crime. This will come up hopefully in October, and we will have very specific connections, because it's so difficult to go beyond the protection of freedom of expression and to have a legislation that it's quite addressing both hate speech and then hate crime and their interconnections. In Europe, Tamas also mentioned that there are certain member states, and I was the rapporteur in the Netherlands during the last visit as ECRI. And the freedom of expression in the Netherlands is something that is extremely well respected. So you really have to find the balance between recognizing and addressing hate crime, identifying it, and hate speech, and at the same time protecting freedom of expression. And we follow the jurisdiction, the case law of the European Court for Human Rights as our golden rule on how to do that, because it's really a difficult balancing act. In the Council of Europe 20 years ago, we had also a protocol to a cybercrime convention concerning the criminalization of acts of a racist and xenophobic nature committed through computer systems. So this cybercrime is becoming now more a reality, and we see more and more regulations addressing this hate speech online. Unfortunately, it is the nature of hate speech and hate crime that their victims often belong to minorities. They feel they don't feel safe. They don't trust institutions like the police. They don't trust the judiciary, and therefore it's so difficult for them to actually register the racist motive of an attack. So addressing the police, having trainings in that respect, having protocols on how to best register and record an incident exactly the way the victim reports it is another challenge that we have to address. And as ECRI in 2021, we adopted a revised general policy recommendation against hatred targeting specific religious groups, namely our general policy recommendation number 5 on preventing and combating anti-Muslim racism, and our general policy recommendation number 9 on preventing and combating anti-Semitism. I hope in June we will adopt our new general policy recommendation on LGBTI people and their rights and addressing violence, hate speech, and hate crime against LGBTI community. And this is really an effort we do within the Council of Europe with synergies with other bodies, but also with the European Union, with OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And I'm very happy that also in the last year, we also have an observer from the US during our plenaries. So again, there is really an opportunity to establish more synergies in that respect. Thank you very much for the time and the opportunity to address you.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your years of service, frankly, and also sharing some of the lessons you've learned and insights today. It's very much appreciated. Our next speaker is Dennis Santiago. Dennis serves as the Chief Operating Officer of the National Diversity Coalition. In addition to his role at the NDC, Dennis Santiago is a global risk and financial analyst. He presently serves as the Chief Operating Officer for financial innovation startup ValShield Corporation. Dennis has held numerous positions over the years at different firms related to risk assessment and security models for financial institutions. In 2011, Dennis helped the city of Los Angeles design and enact its responsible banking ordinance. He is a published author on multiple online and print outlets and is a member of the LA Press Club, Foreign Press Association, and Professional Outdoor Media Association. Since 1992, Dennis has been active sharing the community by working with organizations including Rebuild LA, the LA Police Department, and the Los Angeles Sheriff's Office. Thank you so much, Dennis, for taking time to join us today.
Well, thank you very much. And wow, what a wonderful and interesting update from the world as it is evolving in the European Union. I have always had an interest in the global side of the phenomenon of cultural evolution as we see it happening, and I mean, things like post-colonialism and stuff like that have been near and dear to my heart for a very, very long time. From a it goes back to my days working arms control many years ago in that world. But I would like to bring my comments back to California, and in particular issues having to do with the United States and what kinds of activities are being done here in terms of innovation and collaboration that I thought the group might want to understand. So this organization I'm working with now, the National Diversity Coalition, actually held an event at the beginning of the year in California, and we had a DJ that was scheduled to work the event, and the DJ said I cannot support your event because I've made a commitment to another event to go be the DJ there. And he went to an event in Monterey Park, California, and did not survive a shooting event that took place at that location that very same night that we were having our party. We in the United States, of course, have a, when it comes to stopping hate and how it erupts, one has the perception of quite a bit of randomness to what happens here, but it's really to combat it, the effort that it takes to create what is essentially consensus opinions and consensus collaborations out of what in reality is a nation of 250 million independent ideas that are competing for attention at any given time is a unique challenge. Now, at this organization at NDC, what we try to do is we actually try to work inside the system. And by inside the system, it means that we do a lot of work with federal and state agencies in terms of interacting with and participating in policy committees that try to figure out how to use the tools of government and public policy to mitigate some of the influences that are going on out there in the world. In particular, there's a great emphasis in the United States right now in terms of exploring how to undo systemic unintended negative outcomes that are part of well-meaning public policies that were put together at some time in the past, but are not particularly attuned to the current landscape of the United States as its population mix and interests continue to evolve. The thing to remember is the U.S. is a very dynamic country, and things change over time, and they change regionally and they change locally in terms of who lives where and how that mix comes together. We have just as many problems between people from Mexico versus people from Central America as we do people from any other part of the world that are dropped into pre-existing cultures that occur, and we have a continuous integration problem that occurs in this country. In terms of working within the system, one of the ways that we do it is we interact with corporations and in addition to government, and we do it through what are called interventions, and those interventions create the basis for NGOs like ours to work with what they call community benefit plans, which are things that companies in the United States do in order to participate in the community and bring their employees in contact with the community, better do their services, and they rely on NGOs as the touchstones to tell them where should they concentrate. And so we do quite a bit of work like that. And part of what we do, because this organization works as a hub and spoke model, is we try to bring multiple organizations together to create a coordinated response that is more collaborative in its nature, as opposed to the traditional isolated response of individual organizations that are looking out for the interests of their own group, which in and of itself we have found can cause negative outcome consequences where each group thinks it's doing the right thing for themselves, but the overall societal outcome of it is oftentimes working at cross purposes. And one of the things that we're trying to do with our organization at this point in time is figure out where those cross purposes cause bad things to happen, and work with both government and companies in order to bring that sensitivity out and change the course of where these things are going to a better outcome that works for everyone. One of the things that we wind up doing as we do this is we're also finding we're expanding the base of organizations and cultures that are coming into the collaborative efforts that we're trying to put together. And in some cases, you run across interesting things. For instance, it's as much as we have tried to incorporate the combinations of efforts by government to create programs specifically for the LGBTQ plus community. And it's very, very hard actually to get LGBTQ plus community groups to actually qualify for these things because they just don't fit the mold of what is required to participate in these programs. Or they're off in some other area of emphasis and focus, and what the state does or what corporations are doing don't quite mesh. And so a lot of the work that we try to do is try to figure out how to make those things come together. In the world of Asian, the situation for Asians in the United States, one of the areas we are working on very, very hard is to show the concept that Asians are not a monolithic entity. They're not, there's a great deal of granularity that goes along with Asians in America, in that if you look at the Pacific Rim, for instance, which is about as far away from the European theater as you can get. But if you look at the Pacific Rim and you look at the cultures there, each one of them is unique. And each one of them has beachhead cultures that sit in the United States. And every single one of them has very, very, very different characteristics in terms of their economic integration, their cultural isolation, even from each other. And so one of the things that we are trying to do very, very hard is bring them together in a way that they can find common interest and essentially become a force for the culture that basically says there's a better way to look out for the ones that are still in the process of integrating themselves and assimilating themselves into the larger socioeconomic world of the United States, and maybe have the other aspects of the culture that are better established in the U.S. help them get to the same level that they are, because ultimately you want equality of outcome as how you work public policy, which is a lot. And I understand I'm going very, very fast in this, but I just wanted to give you an overview of just, if you're working in the United States in terms of these things, just what the complexities and the issues that are going on, and hopefully those kinds of insights will be useful to other efforts in both other parts of the United States and other parts of the world. We do everything all the way to media responses, and as a matter of fact, there was a request for proposal, I think, from the California Public Library System for Stop the Hate, focusing on Asians. And what we did as an organization is we look at our ability to reach the community, which was primarily through a network of community groups that span multiple racial groups, and said that's not enough. And so what we did is we activated an element of our ability to reach the media through a television network partner that was integrated into large cable networks in multiple states, and basically put together a response proposal that said, hey, if we created the programming for this and put that out there, and then couple that with an extensive use of social media, and eventually partnering with other news outlets and media organizations to get that same story out in terms of explaining who Asians are, where they come from, what their issues are, how the granularity looks. And you have to create explanatory program to go do that. That's one way of basically breaking down all of the barriers that occur. And I want, in closing, to emphasize that one of the things that we do know about the United States culture is everybody, by and large, wants to see good things happen. The trouble is that the definition of a good thing to one person in the United States can often be very, very difficult to the definition of a good thing to another person in the United States, and they can be living right next door to each other, and that can cause problems, which is kind of one of the interesting things about living in America. But I hope that these comments were of some use to everyone. And thank you so much for the time to be able to address this group.
Well, thank you, Dennis. You've certainly shared a lot of great insights, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Our final speaker today is Laura E. Ellsworth. Laura is a partner at Jones Day, which has more than 2,500 lawyers and 43 offices on 5 continents. Having served as a partner in charge of the Pittsburgh office for over a decade, she then became Jones Day's first partner in charge of global community service initiatives. And I just ran out of my script. I apologize. So Laura has a lot more things that she can say. I apologize. I don't have that to say for you, Laura. I remember your bio being exceptional, and we truly are privileged to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks to you and to Mei for inviting me and for enabling this to happen. The reason I think that I was invited here is that in addition to the work that I do for the law firm, I live in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh was the home in 2018 of the Tree of Life shootings, the largest loss of life in an anti-Semitic crime in US history. Mm-hmm. And because Pittsburgh is a relatively small community, I knew and loved people who died that day, and knew other people who lost family members that day whose lives have never been the same. And I remember standing in my living room watching in complete disbelief what was happening at a place that I jogged by every day that was literally blocks from Mr. Rogers' house, Mr. Rogers, who you watched when you were a kid. It was unfathomable. And when I learned the names of people, and they were people that I knew, I just stood there and I remember thinking, no, not for him, not for this. You will not have died for this. And as a result of that, because of the work that I do around the world, my job is to tackle really big global projects using all of the resources of the law firm, which will be our pro bono ability, our client relationships, academic relationships, nonprofit relationships, political, whatever they may be, to figure out how to connect those dots and solve big problems. And we had done that in things like human trafficking, in immigration, in hate crimes, in different things around the world. And so I reached out within days of the killings and organized a group of leaders in Pittsburgh, all different sectors in Pittsburgh, and proposed starting what we call the Eradicate Hate Global Summit, with the goal of creating the largest multidisciplinary organization in the world that was combating violent hate of all kinds. So not just against Jews. I mean, our killer was screaming, all Jews must die. But the reason he targeted this particular temple is because it was holding a highest meeting for immigrants, and they were supporting immigrants coming to the United States. And so we began to put the project together, and within months, we watched half a world away when Muslims at prayer, 51 Muslims at prayer, were killed in Christchurch. And again and again and again, we saw these killings around the world, whether it be against LGBT people or immigrants in El Paso, or Jews again in Poway, or Sikhs in Oak Creek, or Asians throughout California. Again and again and again, we saw this identity-based violence. And so we pull together a community leadership group, and we used a model that we had used in our private work in other fields that we knew had to change. In our view, the anti-hate world was stuck in an endless conversation loop. It was stuck in academic institutions, but never deployed in the world. It was stuck in policy channels where there was great thinking being done, but no execution through the private companies that needed to do it. Everybody was working in silos. And so the model that had worked in other sectors that needed to change, and that we have now deployed in the summit, is this. We identify the top people in the world in every sector. And like you, Bob and Mei, we believe every single person in our society owns a piece of this solution. This isn't finger pointing at the platform companies or at government or law enforcement or the mental health. Every single one of us has a piece of this solution. So we identify the top people in the world, and we're terrible intellectual snobs. So we're very picky about who we think the top people in the world are. Many of them are on this now. We bring them together in person, because that matters. In Pittsburgh, because that matters. And one reason that matters is because the Eradicate Hate Summit didn't come out of anybody's political view or policy view or anything. It came out of real human beings who lost the people they loved. And all they want is to make sure they do everything in their power to make sure that this doesn't happen to other people. And we know it will. We know we can't stop it. but we believe that through this project, we can stop some of it. So again, top people of the world in person in Pittsburgh. The next thing we do is all of the conversations are focused around a deliverable, a thing that should exist but doesn't, that would make the field better. We identify what those things are through the conversation of all of these multidisciplinary experts. Then we form working groups. The working groups work through the year, and you have the deadline of the next year's conference to be on your feet explaining to the world how you did. So the first year was 2 years ago. We had more than 100 speakers in the middle of COVID, all of whom were in the US on special purpose national interest visas. I never want to do that again. The second year, we had more than 300 speakers here, 2,000 people of all different kinds came. Every sector was represented. The platform companies, medicine, law, journalism, sports, police, military, civil society, governments from all over the world. Very importantly, survivors and survivors of hate crimes of all kinds who didn't come to tell the sob story about who they lost. They came to talk about what they had personally done to join the fight against hate in all of its forms. And so we celebrate them, we amplify them, we introduce them to all of the other disciplines that are here. And for the next summit, which is in September 27 to 29, we would love you all to come and join us. We're expecting more than 300 speakers, more than 2,000 people. We have 22 active working groups of all different kinds with deliverables that we think will make a profound difference. And if I can, I just spend 2 minutes describing one of these working groups and what they did? So one of our keynotes for the first summit was a woman named Alice Indiritu, who is the Undersecretary and Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide at the United Nations. And as was mentioned before, hate speech is the seeds of genocide. We know that, she knows that. And so she came to deliver the Secretary General's remarks. She had 2 international trips she was going to leave for. When she saw what was going on at the summit, she was captivated. She canceled her trips and stayed. 2 days later, she reported to the Security Council that it was the most significant project she'd seen in the world. She'd never seen anything like it. And a week later, she called and she said, would you form a working group to draft the action plan against hate speech for the world of sports? And it so happens that one of our leaders, Michelle Rosenthal, had 2 brothers who were killed at Tree of Life. They were special needs men. They spent their time at the synagogue welcoming people because it was a safe space for them. And as she describes it, as special needs men, they didn't know the difference between Jews or anybody else, or men or women, or they didn't know. And she said they never knew hate until the last moment of their lives. And in their names, she said, yes, I will lead the sports working group. She was also the public affairs person for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So she knew whereof she spoke. Fast forward to today, every single major league of the United States is a member of this working group. And some of the minor ones where a lot of the violent extremists belong and go in sports that they patronize. And in December, we presented at the United Nations, and the United Nations officially launched this game plan that we have written, which is a menu of things that sports teams and leagues and players can do to learn about hate, learn what they can do about it, and deliver a consistent message across all of their platforms. And the reason that matters is this. What we know from the research is the most prolific killers in the world, the people in Pittsburgh and Christchurch and the top supermarket shooting and power. These are young men, 19 to 25 years old, who are alienated and lost. And all of them, virtually, referred to one another by name online and shared the same written manifesto that they cut and pasted for one another. These young men, we also know, care about the world of sports and what the sports teams and leaders and things that they value. And our view is that if we can amplify the voices of sport in a positive way, unambiguously calling out against hate and against violence, that we can influence the people most likely to commit the most horrific events. We also do all other kinds of groups. We have, medical groups. We have something on the Digital Services Act. We have financial services. Whatever industry anyone is in, I guarantee you, we have some body of work underway within the summit It is now, in 2 years, the largest multidisciplinary gathering in the world, and it is the only one that is designed, as I described for you, to have these collaborative working groups of the top people in the world who are working together on specific solution-driven deliverables. And so it's just a real honor to be able to be here to share that, Bob, with you and with the other people who care about this. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, and we would love to welcome you to Pittsburgh in September.
Thank you so much, Laura. We'll check our calendar and be in touch with you. I know we're going to be talking later on. But to the audience, I would just like to say, had I read all of the bio of Laura, we would still be reading because she's engaged in virtually everything in Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania. But you see her reach is much further than just, a local area like that. But thank you so much for your comments. We do have some questions that are popping up in the chat. So I'd like to, if you don't mind, we're about out of time, but I'd like to tackle a couple of these, if you all will bear with me. For Tomas, how difficult is it to identify perpetrators of cyber hate given the anonymity provided by the internet and social media for those who seek to hide their incendiary speech?
Yes, I mean, our main goal is not really to identify perpetrators per se, exactly because it can be very, very hard to do that, and it can be kind of an exercise in futility. So we are mainly focusing on trying to get content removed as quickly and as effectively as possible. Obviously, many of our members know about accounts or people who are regularly or constantly posting extremely hateful things on different platforms. Thankfully, at least within the EU, these accounts get banned and blocked very, very quickly, by the biggest platforms. So they cannot stay on for very, very long. And also some of our members do actually do legal aid and other types of legal support for victims of hate speech and hate crime. So then they might try to go to the authorities and help them to identify the perpetrators. But I think that most of our members don't really do that. If something is so serious within the EU that it kind of calls for authorities to step in, then it usually becomes a matter for the prosecutor's office or some other similar authority to step up and try to identify the perpetrator. But then they usually send a legal notice to Meta or any other platform, to hand out the data of the users.
Awesome. We're really out of time, but I want to do something to include all of the speakers. So we'll just call it a lightning round. And I'm going to ask you one quick question based on your experience, based on what you've devoting your life, at least this portion of it, many of you, your entire adult life. But what is the one thing that you would want to implement to reduce hate? We, after all, at Act Against Hate Alliance want to find solutions. It's not just talking about the same old thing all the time. We want to find solutions. So if we could start, Fiona's not here anymore, but Tomas, if you could say that, then we'll move on down the line.
Educational programs from a very, very early stage about digital media literacy and education about, hate speech and discrimination in general would be extremely important, I think, especially in the parts of Europe where I am from.
Great. Professor?
So building trust with institutions such as the police requires the police to be reflective of society. So opening up police officers so that they would have a proportion of all members of society, everybody would feel much at ease to report an incident. And then legislation that will protect victims that decide to report.
Great. Dennis?
I would like to see a cultural shift in terms of public policy by all groups that participate in it to take more time to look at the argument in the alternative for their ground rules and assumptions and question whether or not their views are in fact the right views to move forward with in context of more communication with other groups, and ultimately be able to come up with solutions that do not continue to perpetuate the outcome wrongs of the past into the future.
Great, thank you. And Laura, you get the final say in this.
That every single person, regardless of where you live, regardless of your profession, finds a way to understand what your role is in solving this problem, because no one thing will ever solve it, but it is solvable if every single person steps up and becomes a part of the solution.
Thank you so much. And that includes everybody on this, Zoom briefing today, as well as those that will see this. Another speaker in another time said, if you see something, say something. And this goes much beyond that. It's not just if you see something, we all see something, right? So we all need to say something. We need to get engaged. I want to just thank all the speakers. You have brought a tremendous wealth of experience to the table today to discuss. I wish we had more time, but hopefully we'll continue to do this, and we may ask you to join our program again. For those of you in the media audience, you'll be receiving a packet later on that has the bios. Please read all of them, because I didn't, say all of them. But additionally, anybody can go to our website, actagainst.hate.org. And on there, you'll find much of what we've done in the past. You'll find today's program link when we get the video completed on that. And let me just give credit to the state of California. This program is made possible because of the Stop the Hate initiative done by the state library. And again, thank you everybody for joining us. This concludes today's program. Go find something to speak out and act against hate. Thank you so much.